Now, the problem with reading non-fiction is that I find it heavily increases my TBR because I find that, they reference different books and then I think, oh, I must read that book as well. Is that a problem or is that a plus? Well, I suppose it depends how you look at it. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, Book Time with Elvis with me, Mark, and I hope very much that you're all doing well and enjoying the summer, or if you happen to be, of course, in the southern hemisphere, enjoying a winter. I want to take this opportunity to thank my wonderful patrons for their continued support. It means absolutely the world to me. Should you wish to join them, of course, you can find all the information below. You will get a week's free trial and access to all my videos before they come out on YouTube, as well as, I hope, some other goodies as well, as I extend it across the entire Book Time with Elvis network that includes Tales from the Quill and My Little House in Bohemia. So have a think about it. And I thought I'd make a video today on two books that I read just in the past week. It's been a while since I've really settled in to reading non-fiction again. I've been reading, of course, history books for Historathon, but I thought I would try and read some different types of non-fiction as well. And the two that I'm going to talk about, I just couldn't put down. They're absolutely fantastic. The first one is called Empireland, How Imperialism Shaped Modern Britain by Sathnam Sanghera. And this was a very interesting read. I wasn't too sure about it to begin with, because I thought it would be perhaps a diatribe against the evils, the absolute evils of empire, the British Empire, and that kind of thing. Now, the problem I've got is that I have a very different outlook in some ways when it comes to empire and the British Empire. Having, to some degree, been a child of empire myself, I know that sounds weird in this day and age, and I'm not, of course, super old, but I was brought up in Britain's oldest self-governing colony of Bermuda, and it still, of course, remains a British overseas territory. And I think my early education was still influenced by certain elements of British imperialism, as it were, I suppose. I think if you were to live in Bermuda and grow up there now, it would be completely different. I mean, definitely the influence put on somewhere like Bermuda is much more Americanized than it was during the mid-80s when I started going to school there. And of course, given the type of school I went to as well, had a much more kind of Anglo outlook. And so I've always been wary of books that I know are going to be too absolute in the judgment that they put forward. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not somebody who pines away and laments the loss of empire and that kind of thing, but I'm also somebody who believes it to be kind of more nuanced. And I think Sanghera definitely has a more nuanced approach to his writing on the British Empire. He makes it clear that it's not, forgive the expression, black and white. It's not clear cut. Certainly there were terrible evils perpetuated by both colonizers and colonized, really, I suppose. Though you can argue as much as you want whether the colonizers should be there or not. I mean, one of my thoughts has always been that if we take India as the main example, of course, is you can look at it as why were the British there to begin with? The way they take over the Indian subcontinent. But then, who are they actually taking over from? They're taking over from the Mughals, who, of course, themselves are not native to the Indian subcontinent themselves. So it's just kind of replacing one foreign imperial rule with another. Both of which, of course, are wrong in this day and age. Now, Sanghera is very interesting because he's a British Sikh. He's born and raised in England. Forgive me, Elvis is barking there. Somebody's must be coming up the stairs. He's born and raised in England, and he has had a very British education. He went to a minor public school and went on to be educated at Oxbridge. And he talks about his kind of lack of education in terms of, well, not being a historian himself, and also his terms of, in terms of not being well educated on the British Empire. And he took the chance during COVID-19, the COVID-19 outbreak, to start writing this book. And as I say, it is excellent. It's very nuanced. I mean, obviously, it is more weighted on the side against empire, but that's to be expected. I mean, even if I were to write a book myself about the subject, I certainly wouldn't be pro-empire. I don't think anyone in their right mind would be these days. But I also appreciate that, it's not something that's 100% evil, and certainly not something that's 100% good. And, atrocities were committed, as I say, really on both sides. Of course, though, they seem worse when committed by the colonizer, because, of course, they're done with really brute force, the brute force that allows them to conquer and colonize the place to begin with. But he goes through different parts of the empire and its legacy in modern day Britain. He talks about the relatively long history of multiculturalism in Britain, looking at some of the first arrivals, from distant lands, be they Africans or Indians, who happen to find themselves living in Britain themselves, which is interesting, and something that isn't widely taught and certainly not widely known, that there have been there has been multicultural elements to England, at least, since Henry VII, at the very least, and probably arguably even longer if we go back to Roman times. I'm sure there were people from all reaches of the Roman Empire within the islands of Britain. Of course, he does look at some terrible events and atrocities perpetuated by the British Empire on its subjects in retaliation to revolts, revolutions, and things like that. But he also interestingly points out that who's actually doing the retaliation, so that there are obviously instances where his own people, if you like, or his ancestry, the Sikh people, are actually perpetuating horrors on Muslims, for example. Obviously at the behest of the British. He looks at different sources from people like Edward Said, Jan Morris, and her books on the British Empire. He also looks at more modern sayings through Twitter and things like that, which has been very interesting, and I really enjoyed it. I found it a very articulate and fascinating account. He includes a lot of anecdotes in it. Some of them are quite humorous, and some of them are really quite horrific. He talks at one stage about slavery, of course, in the Caribbean, and how obviously he points to like the really worst examples. He points to somebody, for example, called Thomas Thistlewood, who used to brand his slaves with his initials. He had them whipped when they ran away, and then had lime juice mixed with salt and pepper rubbed into the wounds and things like that, and other horrible things too, which I am not going to talk about. So there's definitely a lot of horrors within the book as well. And I think, we go from that also to the slaughter of British women and children at Cawnpore during the first Indian War for Independence in 1857, or the Indian Mutiny and things like that. He looks at language as well. He references the rather interesting Hobson-Jobson dictionary, where it looks at the Anglo-Indian words that have made their way into the English language. Of course, one of the most important ones being the word loot, which he discusses in probably one of the best chapters for me in the book, which of course is about the museums in Britain, and the shocking fact that 95% of all the things they have are actually not on display, even though they belong to other countries or came from originally from other countries. They're just hidden away in storage, and yet the museums won't return them. And that, to me, is something that I find difficult to put up with. But all in all, I say it's a very, very interesting read, and can give you a kind of broad overview with some specific case studies as to what the British Empire was like, and also its effects on modern Britain. So why not check out his book Empireland by Sathnam Sanghera. And the second book I want to talk about is one that was really horrific and traumatizing read for me, but absolutely fantastically written, and a very important book that I think if you can, or if you are somebody who can get through extremely difficult topics, then you should definitely try it out. And that's Christina Lamb's Our Bodies, Their Battlefields, which looks at rape as a tool or weapon of war. And Christina Lamb's a fantastic journalist. I've read a couple of her books already, and this one I came across and thought, well, I don't know, it's not something I would normally read, but I read the introduction and thought, yeah, this is good. I found I couldn't really read much more than a chapter a day, because pretty much each chapter is based in a different conflict zone, or a former conflict zone, where Christina Lamb travels to meet the victims of rape and sexual violence in those different conflict zones. So we range from her meeting Yazidi women, victims of ISIS in Syria and Iraq, through to survivors of the war in former Yugoslavia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, through to the women who were raped in the Bangladesh war for independence from Pakistan, the Rohingya people of Burma, or Myanmar, through to terrible atrocities. That it was the most disturbing chapter for me was the chapter on the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, or Congo, which was just horrific, absolutely horrific. That caused me sleepless nights, I have to say. But again, an important read, an important thing to understand, and it's something that I really can't get my head around. Because I've been lucky enough not to experience war. I don't know how I would react, but I think I don't know. As a man, I just don't envisage that I could be so monstrous as these men are behaving in such situations. But of course, I have the luxury of not having to, understand what that's like, and having to experience war, at least not yet anyway, thankfully. But the worse than animals, to be honest, what these people do, and to think, so many of them get away with it is just so frustrating. She does also go into the idea of prosecuting people, and she looks at successful and unsuccessful prosecutions and the legal systems in each country and international law, and how they deal with rape and sexual violence in international criminal courts and things like that. She also goes back further in time to look at the still ongoing, despite their dwindling numbers, fight of the so-called comfort women, to gain an apology from the Japanese government for being forced into sexual slavery during the Second World War. It is, as I say, a very traumatizing and deeply moving read, but I think a very, very important book. And Christina Lamb's done a really fantastic job of bringing such horrors to our attention. The sad thing when reading the book, both for the person reading it and for the women involved, is that you begin to see, especially as there are certain instances where women from these different conflict situations have met up with each other, and it has been a positive force for the more recent victims, but a very negative one for the ones further back in time, because of course they realize that nothing has changed, across a variety of countries and continents, whether it's the women raped during the disappeared era of the Argentine dictatorship of the 70s, from the comfort women through to the Yazidis, on all these different continents, be it South America, Europe, Asia, Africa. Nothing has changed. And that is a terrible, terrible thing. Really terrible thing. And it did make me feel very ashamed to think that, it made me feel ashamed not just as a man, but as a human being, to think that, people can be so horrifically barbaric to each other. So having said that, it is a difficult read, but one I encourage you to pick up. So those are two non-fiction books I've read in the last week that I feel very strongly about recommending to everybody. Thank you ever so much for watching. Do have a great day, and I will see you all again soon. From Elvis and I, bye-bye.